Hey again, Group 6. I'm just realising now that I didn't go over the second drawing exercise that is in the nuku modules. It's another, ungraded PBA that goes into some more colourful shape drawing tools. And I thought I'd do a run through of them and kind of my own interpretation of the instructions that are there, but this is sort of the space where you can go and look up different functions and just mess around with how things work and interpret them a little bit how you want. I also realized that there's another template file called clean program template that is kind of hard to spot, but it's a 200 by 200 thing to start you off. All of the files that support the sketch.js should be the same, so if you have any doubts about that, just delete everything in the sketch.js file and type in the stuff here that isn't a comment, because the comment is just helpful information that Phoebe's added and it doesn't affect it doesn't do anything functional, at least. So the first instruction here is to set the background to a light purple. So I've actually gone ahead and made the background 600 by 600 rather than 200 by 200, but then it, I believe by default, is this 170 here, which basically means 0 is, it's an RGB color, red, green, blue, but 0 is black, 255 is white, and 170 by itself means, as red, green and blue, it's 170, 170, 170. See, that will result in the same thing. And I did this as an extension so I can show you on video, but you can just look this up in like a web browser. Look up like an a color picker, just like a RGB or hex code color picker. I believe you can also type in the name of the color in quotation marks, but I usually use either hex codes or these three numbers, which are 0 to 255 each. And most tools will let you just find a color. So if I wanted that light purple, I would go into here and click it and find the RGB code, which is about equal parts red and blue and less green. Just thinking about that, red and blue mix to make purple, and there's obviously going to be less green in there making that up, and that's going to be even more dramatic as we get away from that grey, which is all of it combined. So here on this fully saturated side, it's all red and blue. Anyways, I'll go back to this more lighter colour and take these out and replace these numbers here. And you'll see if I go back to the live p5 and save that, it will now reflect that. So the next instruction is to have a grey square with a black stroke in the canvas centre. What's meant by stroke is the line that's being drawn, and by default it will have an RGB colour of 0 or 000 and a thickness of, I think, 1 pixel. Not quite sure, but that looks about that on that circle there. So I'm going to erase this ellipse here because it's not part of the drawing exercise, and draw a square in the canvas centre. So just thinking about the coordinate system again, the canvas center is in the middle of the X and Y coordinates of the canvas. So we've got 0 here, we've got 600 here, so the middle of that's going to be 300. Same in the Y direction, 0, 600, 300. So what happens if we draw a square? I'm not even sure if square is the function for this, it might just be rect. But if we go 300, 300, and then maybe 100. Okay, so I think what this has done here is start the drawing of the square at 300, 300, because that looks like the middle right there, and it's made it of side lengths 100. But what it's done is not center it, it's drawn from the corner, and that's because there's this inbuilt function, again, in P5 called rect mode. And what we can do, I'd do this in the setup function unless you're going to be changing it throughout your code, is type in rect mode, and what it's, the default is as if this is sitting here, but what we want is rect mode to be in the center, and that is going to draw those shapes with the 0, 0 point being in the middle. Now the other instruction was the square should be grey, so what I would do here is go fill. Oh my goodness, that's why intelligence sense is off in the tutorials. And fill that in a sort of light grey, I'd say. Yeah, that works. And if I wanted to change the thickness of the line that outlines the rectangle, go stroke weight, then something like 5, and that's going to be a very thick line. Now that is 100, I'll make it a little bigger, sure. The next instruction is two green circles in the top half of the canvas on top of the square. So maybe just, if we're putting them in the top half of the canvas, but also have them be covering the square that's in the center of the canvas, either what we could do is make the circles really close to the center of the canvas but still in the top half, or we could just make the square a lot bigger, so it's sort of necessary that that happens, that overlap happens. So I'm gonna sort of do the middle option there and just make that a bit bigger. To make these circles green, I'm just going to change the fill to a sort of greenish colour. I'm going to just take a random guess and go 100 red, 150 blue, and 220 green. And that we'll see when I draw it. There's a function called circle, and there's also a function called ellipse, which isn't that, which is for drawing non-perfect circles, so oblongs and stuff like that, ovals. Circle, I believe you give it an x and y, and then radius, which is measuring from the middle of the circle to its outside. So if we go x 100, y 100, and then radius 100. I think that's drawn from the center, which is interesting. That's what I meant to do there. Red, green, blue, not red, blue, green. It's drawn 100, 100, and then its width is 100. its radius. So I'm going to make this a lot bigger. That's very big. 200. Now that's an interesting bug. I think that's why somebody was having a problem before. It might be this P5 panel. It's always better to have the web browser version of the live server, I'd say. Now that overlap's not quite happening, so what I'm going to do is just move it in by 50 pixels. So let's go 150 and 150. I think I know why it's doing this little visual quirkiness, but that's okay. Easy way to draw another circle is just copy and paste that, and now since we still want it in the top half of the screen but we want it on the other side, we're just going to move it along by say 300 pixels in the X direction. So the first parameter here is the X value, there's the Y value, there's either radius or diameter. I think it's diameter. If we give that 450 there, there's our second circle. Now the next instruction is to have some blue lines behind the green circles. Now this instruction I think is here to make you think a little bit about the order of operations and how things are drawn based on not what's at the top of the code like a layer system in Photoshop, but based on the order of which they are run through. If you're reading the code line by line, it's going to do things in that order. So the last thing that you write in the code is the last thing that it's going to do, so that's going to be the thing that's on top of everything else. So going by that logic, if we go back behind everything else, we can draw these lines. Now it's behind everything else except for the background, which is drawn in the setup function. Some blue lines behind the green circles. So first I guess we'd want that blue color, so I'm going to have to do two things here. I'm going to change the stroke color to a blue color, so it should be a dark blue, and that's changed all of the stroke colors because there's no other point at which the stroke function is called in this code, so it's going to go through and apply it to every other thing that's drawn after it. But I'm only putting these lines here, and then I want the stroke to be black again. So after I've drawn these lines, I'm going to have another stroke which is either 0, 0, 0 or just 0. So I'm going to go 0, 0, 0. Now everything that is after this blue stroke and before this black stroke will have that blue color. Now I'm just going to quickly draw some lines. Cool, so I've kind of just kept things very symmetrical, very sort of simple, maybe to illustrate how these lines are behind the grey circles here. I could have them going straight through the green circles, and what I'm actually going to do is make the lines on top of the squares but below the circles, so I'll make that change now. Nice, okay. Sorry if that was a bad explanation, but that's what I meant by that. Now the last instruction is probably the weirdest of all of them. A sort of medium-sized oval not touching any of the straight lines that is the same colour as your shirt. So my shirt was already a kind of green colour, so I think I'll make it light blue, which was like the secondary colour of my shirt. Not touching any straight lines, but if it can touch anything else, I guess I can just put it anywhere around here. I'm going to be using the ellipse tool to draw this oval, and that is very similar to the circle, except instead of giving it one value for its size, sort of overall size x and y, you give it an x and y value for its width and height. So thinking about how x is along, y is up and down, x and y is the same when it comes to size. So just give it 3, 4, 50, 450, maybe 300, and then make it 150 by 300, maybe 300 by 150. Sweet. I was expecting it to be a little bit bigger, and yeah, I might make it a little bit bigger because of that. Awesome. So these are the sorts of things I want to see coming out of this drawing exercise by next studio. If anything is kind of hard for you to understand, if there's something that's not covered in one of Phoebe's videos, then definitely just look up the different functions, or how to draw a circle, how to draw a rectangle, how to change the colour in the p5.js.org website. But the other thing you can do is to check out the playlist that I made of YouTube tutorials by the Coding Train YouTube channel. There's some really good step-by-step walkthroughs of p5.js's capability, I guess. So I'll see you at the lecture next Monday.